What's up, my good people of the internet? Dan Tortora here, hanging out with you where sports truly meets that thing called life. Hope you're having yourselves a fantastic morning this morning and making the most of your week, making the most of your day. I hope that life has been great to you, and hopefully that all continues. And we continue to have I can't believe we're midweek. I can't believe it's August already. I mean, I genuinely, and I think I've said this every single month of being here in the studio for 2023, that I still feel like it just became January. Like, I honestly feel like I was just saying, like, Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2023. It's January, and now here we are. It's August. So I hope you're having a great morning. I hope you're making the most of it. And I hope your week has been great. And, you know, whatever's stressing you out or bothering you or taking up your time, I hope that things only get better and that your week gets better, your day gets better, and that those problems that you have, that they don't persist. You find solutions, you respond positively to adversity, and that you have yourselves some resolutions coming up very soon. So with that being said, inside of MonPausPopcorn.com's What's Poppin', we got an awesome show set up here for you today. We thank you for your patience. AD and DT are going to start things off as we have Dolphin time every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. The LeMoyne College Dolphins and our exclusive multimedia marketing partnership join me here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Every first and third Wednesday, we feature AD and DT episodes, which are with Athletics Director Bob Beretta of LeMoyne and myself, Dan Tortora. Today, we'll be discussing the fact that we are only weeks away, not even 3 weeks away. We are less than 21 days away of the official start of Division I play for LeMoyne College, and that's going to be on the pitch with women's soccer, followed by men's soccer. So a lot of great stuff coming up there. We're going to be discussing that, as well as discussing coming on the heels of my exclusive release of the reality that Callum Donnelly, the interim head coach, is going to be the interim head coach for LeMoyne Dolphins men's soccer. So coming off of my release of the article and my release of the official first conversation with Callum, we'll be talking with Bob about that decision, and we'll also speak on facility additions and facility upgrades and kind of the timetable of different things going on the Heights at LeMoyne. Then in hour number one, following AD and DT, we will discuss Syracuse football. I had the opportunity to usher in the 2023 season by having some Q&A time with head coach Dino, as well as defensive back Justin Barron and wide receiver Damien Alford. So you'll get to hear what they had to say, and you can go and watch those videos as well on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. That's youtube.com/wakeupcalldt, where some of you are literally right now to watch our broadcast. You can stay there and make sure that you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos coming up here, as we have the opportunity to speak with Syracuse Orange football representatives, and we'll be doing that all throughout the season. So very excited to do that with you. And of course, in hour number two, I'm going to be continuing that football conversation with a broader look. So we'll go from talking about Syracuse to looking at the entire ACC with my guy Alex Dodd, and he has been doing an incredible job. He's now the sports editor up in Rapid City, so excited to speak with him and have him on the show to talk all things ACC, as he's been covering ACC football for many, many years. So a lot of great stuff coming up here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports meets life. AD and DT right after this fast break.
Carvel DeWitt, it's what happy tastes like. Do you know why? Because we make ice cream. Creamy, rich, flavorful ice cream. Not yogurt or iced milk like some of our competitors. Ice cream. Fresh, by hand, daily. For the calorie conscious, we have something new for you. Our new Carvelite. Same great flavor, creaminess, and texture of our regular ice cream with only 35 calories an ounce. So whether you want an ice cream cake, flying saucer, dasher, carvalanche, hard or soft ice cream, we will satisfy your craving with our fresh, handmade regular or new Carvelite ice cream. Carvel DeWitt. It's what happy tastes like.
This is Jimmer Sikowski, owner-operator of Chick-fil-A Cicero, 7916 Brewerton Road in Cicero, right in front of the Home Depot. I had a deep feeling that God wanted me to do something bigger with my life and to help people, help others. I kept putting Chick-fil-A in my life, and I realized as I was going through the franchise selection process that positively impacting the lives of others was really core to what we do here at Chick-fil-A. First of all, it starts with the food. The food is brought in fresh daily. We bring in local produce. We prepare to order in the kitchen. We hand bread our chicken. We hand spin our milkshakes. It's great food. It doesn't taste like fast food. I think the second thing is the way people feel when they come in a Chick-fil-A restaurant. It's different. We try to treat people with intentional kindness here, which is very different and deeper than good customer service. And so I think it feels remarkable for most people to come in a Chick-fil-A restaurant. And then lastly, the impact that we try to have in the community is very different. It's a big part of the expectation of every operator of a Chick-fil-A restaurant is that they're actively engaged in their community, they're a leader in the community, and they're making a difference. When they realize that what we're striving to do is to shine a little light in their life, that's a very, very different experience than you will have in any other quick service restaurant. And it's that remarkable experience that I think people will emotionally connect with.
The Wildcat Sports Pub in Camillus, New York is located on 3680 Milton Avenue in the Home Depot Plaza. It is your family-friendly sports bar and restaurant. Folks, some sports bars aren't family-friendly. Some family-friendly restaurants are not sports bars. The Wildcat Sports Pub in Camillus, New York is proud to be both. It is that marriage that you've been looking for years. The Wildcat Sports Pub is your home base for your sports bar and restaurant needs, games for the kids, indoor and outdoor activities, and enough things on the menu to come back every single week and get to try something new. They're open Sundays from noon to 8 p.m., Monday through Wednesday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Thursday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to midnight. For reservations and party information, call 315-487-2222 for the Wildcat family-friendly sports pub and restaurant. To this edition of AD and DT with Athletics Director Bob Beretta and myself, Dan Tortora, here with LeMoyne College's Spotlight and our exclusive multimedia marketing partnership. Bob, how are you?
I'm excellent, Dan. How are you?
Doing very well. And so you can see that I'm a little relaxed here after being down in Arlington, Texas and Charlotte, North Carolina, where the median temperature was between 97 and 100 degrees. So happy to be up here on the Heights in Central New York, where it's also been very warm, and there's a lot of things. It's kind of poetic because things are heating up here. We're heading quickly toward the start of the season, and as we're here now in August, on August 2nd, we know that within this month, we will officially see the Division I move on the field as the soccer teams will officially be on the pitch in August, which is crazy.
Yeah, it really is. You know, Dan, we're welcoming back our women's soccer team this week, and they'll begin training this week, and they'll kick us off, so to speak. They'll begin Division I competition here at LeMoyne on August 17th at Maine.
Yeah.
As you released our entire schedule, we were able to get that out to the public here last week, along with the men's soccer schedule, and the women will have the honor of debuting LeMoyne in the NEC as a non-conference game against Maine.
And just what that means to see kind of the road that women's soccer has gone through. Last year, Yaro Zavaslan coming in as an interim head coach at the time, and in a close quarters just a couple weeks before the season started, to do what he and his staff were able to do, and now to be moving into Division I. He's the official head coach. There's a lot to be said about how that team was in need of leadership, and now as they head into Division I, they definitely came off of last season finding leadership on the field and finding it on the sideline as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the trajectory of that program, Dan. I feel like Coach Yarrow came in here and set a new standard for the program, really lent discipline, I think, vision, and I think that the team enjoyed a successful season last year despite its record. I think they were very competitive against the elite competition, the top competition in the NE10, which is the top Division II women's soccer conference in the country. And I think that we held our own, and since that time, he and the staff have been very busy adding talent, adding first-year players, adding some transfers. So I'm really excited about the direction that program is headed. I can't wait to watch them train. I can't wait to watch them compete. We have some familiar names coming back, which will really be helpful to us on the field, and then some exciting new names, some freshmen that are really talented, and some transfer students that'll help us as well. So I think we're going to increase our talent level at the top end of the roster, but also in the middle and the bottom ends of the roster from a depth standpoint. So really excited about the women's soccer program under Coach Yarrow's leadership.
And we look at the men's soccer program, which will start off their season on the road at Penn State.
That's right.
Facing off a Big Ten opponent. So very exciting for what's to come with them, as well as with the new leadership of their interim head coach, Callum Donnelly, who had been an assistant and a graduate student and a student athlete on the team before that.
Yeah, we really felt, due to the timing, that it made the most sense, Dan, to just elevate Callum into that interim level. And it wasn't just about timing. I've been able to watch and evaluate Callum's leadership skills in the time that I've been here at LeMoyne. Been very impressed how he trains the young men in the program, how they respond to his leadership. So we felt, from a continuity standpoint, from really just the best person right now to lead that program after Coach Bonus's retirement announcement was Callum. And Coach, he will have an opportunity now to lead that program throughout the season. Our plan is to conduct a national search at season's end, and hopefully Coach Callum will be a candidate for that. But right now it's Coach Callum's program to run, and we're really excited about the leadership that he's going to lend to that program.
And like you said, the timing of it, but also what Callum has brought to the program as a piece of that staff already under Tom Bonus, it made you feel like it was the right fit, but then knowing that there's this national search, it's a job that hasn't been open for over 2 decades. Is there excitement to the opportunity of saying that kind of in the background here, there's a position here at LeMoyne on the Heights that you can kind of gauge and see at this Division I level and in the NEC who's going to be excited about putting the resume in for something that we haven't seen open up in such a long time?
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. It hasn't been open for a long time, and that speaks to the continuity and the long run that Tom Bonus had, a long and successful run that Tom Bonus had here as our head coach. And I know that this is a job that will appeal to a lot of people, to a great audience. And we're excited to see who may or may not be interested in this position. It's a Division I position now, and there's only so many of those across the country, and we feel like that our product is one that there's going to be people that'll be very interested in it. But by the same token, we're interested in right now we're excited about Coach Callum Donnelly and his opportunity to lead this program. And every day will be an interview for Coach Donnelly. He knows that, and he'll be a candidate as well. But I don't really want to put the cart before the horse and look too far down the road while we're excited about what could be. I'm also excited about Coach Callum's leadership and his opportunity now to guide these young men and the continuity that he brings. He played a large role in all the on-field, in-game tactics and strategies, and was very involved in the recruiting of the young men that are in the program right now and the ones that are coming in as first years in the transfers. So I'm excited overall. We felt like this team this year was going to compete for a championship in the NE10. They really were on a positive trajectory, and we feel like they have the opportunity to be very competitive now in the Northeast Conference as well.
And like you said, Callum, what he's done with being a part of the staff already, and the fact that there's 8 new faces coming in, and his connection to that, as well as you all saw in our special on the field inside of the net with Tom Bonus, he's definitely seen the effect that Callum has and has given him his vote of confidence as well. So, Callum Donnelly, this is going to be a and I'm hoping for you, Callum, that it's similar to Yarrow's, where we get to see what can come from this and excitement for Division I. As we're stepping toward this road to Division I, being real on the fields and the courts and the tracks and the pools of life. This transfer portal, as well as finding high school and prep school students, like you've mentioned here, bringing in some transfers, do you lean on that a little bit more, being in this transition to Division I, of saying, hey, let's find some people that have maybe played Division I in these certain athletic programs so that we can carry over this bridge a little bit easier with people that had experience?
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. And I wouldn't say that's something that we do consciously. And I'm a firm believer that you build a program with your 4-year students, that you recruit first years, you bring them in, you build a culture, they want to stay, they grow, and they grow into great people, great athletes, and tremendous contributors on the field and off. That's how you build a program, in my opinion. Having said that, we are in the transfer portal age, and we're losing players to the portal. So we have to play in that space. We have to be a player in there, and we're looking to plug gaps. To me, that's where a successful program can really operate and find where we have some voids. And to your point, right now, in this new Division I world, it allows us maybe to go out and recruit some Division I talent that is looking for a new home, and it might fit a need for us. So I don't want to become Transfer U. I've told our coaches that, and they know that, and they don't believe that either, but I definitely think there's a place in our program for transfer students. We welcome them with open arms. We feel like they're a great fit, and now as we transition to Division I, if they come in with Division I experience, that only lends to our capabilities on the field as well.
Yeah, and like you said, you don't want to become Transfer U. You understand that it's there, but you look at the building blocks of what you have. When you've kind of looked at these last few months in preparation with the coaches that you have leading your programs, and obviously some faces coming in that are new to being a head coach, like Callum Donnelly, but a familiar face, and then in the case of women's volleyball with Susan Kim, a new face coming onto campus. As you have worked toward this official, Division I, let's get on the field, let's get on the court, the pool, and the track, and get after this, how have the coaches kind of, in your opinion, moved in this bridge to Division I?
Dan, I've been so impressed by the work that our coaches have done in the past several months. Just in building schedules for this year has been an incredible challenge. Remember, we announced on May 10th, and for these fall sports, it's really difficult to put a schedule together to find schools that had openings in their schedule. So I know there's been some comments about how road heavy we are this year, and we're going to be road heavy. We knew that. Just because in order to start a series, sometimes you have to agree to start on the road. And we had no leverage. We were starting that we needed games. Whether they be home or away, we needed games to play. So if the majority are on the road, so be it. That means, though, the good news is that next year the majority of our games will be home. When I'm talking about these games, these are non-conference contests. And then by year 3, we feel like we'll be able to have struck a balance between home and away. Generally, if you have a dozen non-conference games, you'd like to have 6 and 6 or some close ratio. This year, in some cases, we're maybe 5 and 7, where we're on the road majority of the time. But that was a product of the timing of all this, and we know that's some short-term pain for long-term gain. But I have been so impressed with the schedules that we've put together. You've seen them, right? You've seen the 2 soccers now that we've announced, and they're very representative. We want to be geographically minded around to be in Central New York where we can, to try to reduce missed class time and travel, and create some new and exciting rivalries with some of our other Central and Western New York opponents like Canisius and Niagara, and play some other Jesuit institutions where we can. And Canisius is one of them. And then we've announced the men's basketball game against Georgetown. Hopefully this week we have a few more that we're going to announce, and even on the women's side. But in order to put these representative schedules together, our coaches, it took a tremendous amount of diligence on their part and stick-to-itiveness, if you will, to continue to pound the rock, to go back where maybe it was a round peg in a square hole and change a date and try to. So not everything is perfect, we know that, but in terms of the work that they've done, particularly our fall sports, I'm so impressed by the work that they've done, and I can't wait to get out and watch the competitions. I think they're going to be extremely exciting and very competitive.
And before we finish up this edition of AD and DT, as we get set to be on the pitch for the soccer seasons for women's and men's soccer here at LeMoyne, the concession, bathroom, all of that had been worked on immediately the day after men's lacrosse finished up their season. Where are we at in having things, obviously ready to go for this upcoming season?
Yeah, so we thought the concession facility might not be online until November when this started, because there's just so much work on the interior side, and they're ahead of schedule. They won't be available to our fans and followers here in September. Hopefully in October we'll find out. The building is up, and now it's all the plumbing and all those things that need to be done in the infrastructure of that building, but it's ahead of schedule. We thought from the start November was kind of when it would be operational really for the spring sports.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of time, but they're ahead of schedule, and I think it's a tremendous enhancement for our fan experience and for our student athletes, because remember, those are the restrooms that our student athletes are going to be using during competitions and during training sessions, and not just for the soccer and lacrosse teams, but for baseball over there. So I think that it serves many different purposes. Then the other two major projects that we have online are baseball dugouts. We feel like they'll be delivered in September, and that's our date here. So the existing structures will be demolished and new dugouts brought in September, and then we're going to have a press box for softball in time for the spring season. Right now the plan is it would be delivered in November. So those are three major enhancement projects, not just for our student athletes, but also for our workers, for our fans, because everything that we do in those spaces, we operate with a mindset of how is it going to affect fan experience. And maybe the dugouts not so much, but certainly student athlete experience, and more than anything else, the most important part of the dugout situation for me was health and safety. I thought that it was a health and safety issue for both our student athletes and our visiting teams. Those dugouts were very small, outdated, and these will be luxurious, spacious, netting. They'll be beautiful, and it'll well represent LeMoyne College.
Yeah, I want to drive it home once again to everybody that those three pieces were plans that you had told me well before any Division I conversation came up. So this was in place, be it Division II or Division I, for LeMoyne to enhance the student athlete, the fan, and overall community experience for baseball, for softball, and of course for every sport that's played on Ted Grant Field. And so, I find that to be really important to say that this wasn't a Division I decision, this was a LeMoyne decision.
That's right.
And it's coming through.
That's right. And the other piece of that right now is we feel like in September we're going to get a plan from Moody Nolan, the architect that we hired here, to study our event center. And that's the building in which we're talking right now, but it houses our locker rooms, our athletic training, our strength and conditioning, all of our coaches' offices, our administrative staff offices, all those things. So this firm has been looking at this building since late spring, March, late February, early March, I'd say, and they're coming to a plan to how we can expand this building, areas we can expand and renovate, and that will greatly affect the student athlete experience and all of our coaches and all of our staff. That's really exciting, and we feel like we're going to hopefully divide that up into some $5 million projects and be able to tackle maybe one every year here moving forward. But we need to take a look at the plan and see how it's going to be sequenced and prioritized, but really exciting times here for sure.
A lot of great stuff happening here on the Heights. For AD&DT Athletics Director Bob Beretta and myself, Dan Tortora, aka DT, we wish you all a fantastic day. We'll be back after this fast break on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, and as always, fins up.
Fins up, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Hi, this is Amy from Mother's Cupboard, home of the whole frittata. We are open daily 6 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. For takeout orders, call 315-432-0942 and tune in to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora for our monthly food challenge and try our Wake Up Call signature menu item available 7 days a week. Here at Mother's Cupboard, we are Central New York, and it's our honor to serve you.
Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory remind us that every day is worth celebrating. Find them at 201 Old 7th North Street in Liverpool, New York. Open Monday through Saturday in-store and all the time online at maandpaspopcorn.com. Serving our Central New York community and beyond, you can order all throughout the country at maandpaspopcorn.com. And remember to get your tins, which have in-store half-price refills forever. Mon Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory, available to you for fundraising and all of your events by calling 315-450-6272. That's 315-450-6272. Mon Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory. How corny are you? This is a special message from Merritt Brady, owner-operator of Chick-fil-A Watertown on 1290 Arsenal Street in Watertown, New York.
Chick-fil-A for me has always been about the people. I think it starts with the strength and leadership of the Cathy family. It's just amazing to see a family-run business reach the altitude that they have. Second mile service is something that we embodied at my previous business, and the ability to make people feel like they're the only person at your establishment, that you are there to serve them that day and looking for those extra ways to make them happy, to anticipate what they need next is what makes me tick. And I'm going to have so many opportunities at Chick-fil-A to do that. It's one of my favorite things to eat in the world. My favorite application question or interview question when I'm interviewing is when I get to, have you ever eaten at Chick-fil-A? And a smile hits both their ears. You know, they can't even answer the question for a second. And when I see that, it's like, man, that's going to be a great hire. They already get it. They already feel it. They already know that we're different. The Chick-fil-A experience, it's a real thing. And then, of course, just our generosity and community involvement and making a positive impact in the lives of our team members, our guests, and the community in general, I think is really the secret sauce.
Coach, just going into this season here for 2023 and your eighth at Syracuse, just reflecting on what you've kind of taken and building this culture that you have and where you feel like the culture and the environment is at as you step forward.
Well, I think the culture is right on. I think obviously based off of some of the newspaper articles and some of the things that you've heard members of the Ohana say in the paper, not only this year but last year, but the culture is strong. You know, we've had situations where certain people have left us and that's been out of our control. But when you think about where this thing started, I believe we were like 4-8, then we get to the 10-2 season, 10-3 season, we finished second in the conference, to coming back 5-7, then having COVID hit, and then have to reload all again, and then being introduced to NIL and transfer portal and all those things that which affects personnel, and then having an opportunity.
Coach, just going into this season here for 2023 and your eighth at Syracuse, just reflecting on what you've kind of taken. And I'm just realizing here that we had our audio off here, so I apologize for that. Very much apologize for that. We had shut the audio off for AD and DT's feedback here, so apologize for that. Let me restart here and say that again about Syracuse football. Dino talking about culture and thinking that things are good. We will see, as the team has had a bunch of seasons under 500, the 4-8s, the 5-7s, the 1-10s. You know, one season of 10-3, last season of getting to a bowl game and really not showing out in the bowl game, a very dismal bowl game for Syracuse. So hopefully things will bounce back from here. Hopefully we'll see some more positives come for Syracuse as they step forward here. But, you know, the culture as of right now is a question mark. Dino feels like it's good. He feels like the Ohana is good, and we'll look to see if that translates onto the field. I asked Dino about resetting and refocusing. He was talking about how coaches right before fall camp have an opportunity to get away, to go on vacation, to do some things to kind of just, you know, refocus, reset, recharge their batteries, relax. I asked him how he did it. This is what he had to say. Coach, you talked about coaches getting away before we start fall camp. Having that opportunity to reset, refocus, how have you kind of done that yourself? And have you, over these last 8 years being here at Syracuse, have you developed a plan of kind of the right way for you to refocus and wipe the slate clean again?
You know, I don't know if I ever wiped it clean. May not be telling the truth if I said that to you. I get peace by watching them train. Okay, when the coaches go away in July, I'm allowed to watch them run. Okay, and I watch them run, and I watch them sweat, and it's a process. And they're getting up early, and they're running, and they're lifting weights, and there's no one else around. There's no students really around. The town is extremely quiet. which is kind of cool for me, but for them, at their age, it's not. And they put in a lot of work. They really do. And
Coach, you talked about coaches getting away.
So
before
we look at that and we listen into, you know, what Coach had to say about guys getting away and getting some time and refocusing, recharging their batteries, putting themselves in a situation to obviously, you know, get ready for the season. And he said he doesn't know if he ever truly wipes the slate clean, which I found to be interesting here. You know, if he truly takes everything away, or if he just, you know, takes some pieces away and says, hey, you know, this is where we're at. So with that, I want to continue the conversations and some of these have gotten cut off here. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to replay the two things that Dino had to say, because I want to make sure everybody gets to hear them. And then we'll go to Justin Barron and Damien Alford. So this is my question to Dino about building culture at Syracuse.
At Syracuse, just reflecting on what you've kind of taken and building this culture that you have and where you feel like the culture and the environment is at as you step forward.
Well, I think the culture is right on. I think obviously based off of some of the newspaper articles and some of the things that you've heard members of the Ohana say in the paper, not only this year but last year, but the culture is strong. You know, we've had situations where certain people have left us and that's been out of our control. But when you think about where this thing started, I believe we were like 4-8, then we get to the 10-2 season, 10-3 season. We finished second in the conference. To coming back 5-7, then having COVID hit, and then have to reload all again, and then being introduced to NIL and the transfer portal and all those things that which affects personnel, and then having an opportunity to finish third last year. I'm looking forward to where we can go with this. It's another opportunity for us to have back-to-back winning seasons, which are extremely rare.
Talking about having back-to-back winning seasons, which are extremely rare around Syracuse. And so, you know, having that discussion, and I thought it was interesting that Dino brought that up at the end, saying, hey, you know, having back-to-back winning seasons in Syracuse is rare. And, you know, so him knowing that, I mean, historically, since Paul Pasqualoni, it has been rare. We did not see the consistency with Doug Marrone. We did not see the consistency with Scott Schaefer. We haven't seen the consistency with Greg Robinson or Dino Babers. So, you know, we're in a place right now where you're hoping that Syracuse can bounce back and that they can figure it, not even bounce back, that they could figure it out, that they can create consistency, and that they could find a way to win over and over again instead of just kind of winning sometimes and seeing it from that perspective. I had some fun with Dino and another question that I had the opportunity to ask him, so I'm going to share that one with you right now.
Someone on this team, or a few of the guys on the team going into training camp, that are that equalizer, that underestimated guy that's going to come through for the team this season?
Oh, I can't do that, DT. You know I don't do that.
You got to give us somebody who's like a catalyst, someone who you can lean on a little bit.
All right, I'll give you two people.
Okay.
The punter Stonehouse and the place kicker Brady. I think they're going to be difference makers.
Can you go into that a little bit more, too?
I think they're going to be really good.
Okay. I think that's the least you've ever given me on a question.
You know.
I'm not going to pull them apart. I'm going to bring them together.
So my question to Dino, and the whole point of me asking the question that I had asked, was not to obviously have him talk about somebody better than somebody else. It was to, you know, I mean, what any of us are looking at, what I've looked at over 19 plus years of being a broadcaster, which is when you look at a team, who are the catalysts, who are the leaders, who are the returners that you're leaning on, who are some of the newcomers that could step in right away. You're looking for those pillars that can help you build success that season. And Dino didn't want to address who he thinks some of those people might be. I mean, I would think that Garrett Trader's got to take some leadership. I would look at Aronde Gadsden the second. I would look at Marlo Wax Jr. as a linebacker on the other side of the ball. I mean, Justin Barron potentially, who you're going to hear from here in a second, at defensive back. I mean, to me, there's names that I think, you know, even the fans would pick out and say, okay, I think it's going to be this guy, or I think it's going to be that guy. So, yeah, I was a little surprised that Dino didn't want to get into that and kind of discuss who his catalysts are, but we had some fun with it, and I've known Dino since he came into Syracuse, so I appreciate the fact that we always get to have a good time when we have these conversations, and I always appreciate his time. The next one that we have up here is going to be my conversation, my Q&A with Dino about that resetting and refocusing, because it cut out a little bit here, so I want to make sure that you get to hear it all. This is what Dino had to say about resetting and refocusing from one season to the next.
You talked about coaches getting away before we start fall camp. Having that opportunity to reset, refocus, how have you kind of done that yourself? And have you, over these last 8 years being here at Syracuse, have you developed a plan of kind of the right way for you to refocus and wipe the slate clean again?
You know, I don't know if I ever wiped it clean. May not be telling the truth if I said that to you. I get peace by watching them train. Okay, when the coaches go away in July, I'm allowed to watch them run. Okay, and I watch them run. I watch them sweat, and it's a process. And they're getting up early, and they're running, and they're lifting weights, and there's no one else around. There's no students really around. The town is extremely quiet, which is kind of cool for me, but for them, at their age, it's not. And they put in a lot of work. They really do. And we give them 10 days off. 10 days off before they get back here. They get back and see their families. But when they come back, August is a process. But they're ready to go. They've been doing this because they want to put on a show in September. And they want to have the Loud House rocking once again. And no bones about it. They like playing. They like performing. And we want to just try to get the best out of them. So I don't do much. I just kind of hang around town and watch those guys run in the morning and try to make sure I don't get too heavy so my training in August can start and I can look right in September.
That coming here from Dino Babers, giving his thoughts on this team and obviously in preparation and getting ready for, this season and resetting and refocusing and what he does. Like he said, he doesn't ever truly wipe the slate completely clean, but, he does enjoy the opportunity to going out and seeing the team train and to see, to essentially to see them run, right? To see them go out there and get ready and get their bodies right for the season. Justin Barron is up next, defensive back for the Syracuse Orange. This is what he had to say about new defensive coordinator Rocky Long. Now, Rocky Long is the creator of the 3-3-5. Some people say creator or co-creator of the 3-3-5. So even though they lose Tony White, who they had for 3 seasons, they gain Rocky Long, and so the defense is going to stay the same. I asked Justin Barron about Rocky Long being their new defensive coordinator and what he's done to put his personal touch on the defense.
And just what you could say about defensive coordinator Rocky Long, what it's like having him in the room. Obviously, he keeps the defense the same, but what's his kind of personal touch that he's put on it?
It's exciting having him. We get to learn a lot. He's the one who made defense. So there's so many more possibilities that we can do. Like, not that I can tell you guys what we're actually going to do, but there's a lot of new things that we can implement with him here now that we have a better understanding of how it actually works.
That coming from Justin Barron to give his thoughts on Rocky Long and him coming in to this team and coming on to this defense to lead Syracuse again and to lead Syracuse for the first time, I should say, and to see what this team can do in the continuation. I mean, the good thing is, yes, you have a new defensive coordinator, but, I mean, it's essentially when Tony White leaves and Rocky Long comes in, it's like you lose Luke Skywalker, but you gain Yoda. And so, to me, I think that hopefully this defense can have some continuity and some continuity on the coaching staff, which hasn't happened in a while for, Syracuse under Dino Babers with the staff, consistently changing from season to season in a lot of different areas. I spoke with wide receiver Damien Alford on him elevating his game and what he's done to personally get better. This is what Damien had to say.
Damien, your own personal growth, just what you can say about what you've done to elevate yourself to the weapon that we're going to see this season.
And this is what Damien had to say as we get this set here.
To the weapon that we're going to see this season.
Well, when I
I came in freshman year, I really did not expect to be in the situation I am right now. I feel like I got better, stronger. I am very good at the offense. I know how to read defense better. I'm not physical, so I feel like I took a big stride to get to where I was right now, to where I am right now. So I'm pretty happy with it.
That coming from Damien Alford. I had the opportunity as well to speak with both Damien and Justin Barron about this transfer portal, which has essentially created collegiate free agency. And I asked both the gentlemen what they can say about why they stayed at Syracuse, why they chose, in collegiate free agency to remain a member of this Syracuse Orange team. And this is what Justin had to say.
The transfer portal has allowed free agency in college football. What keeps you coming back to Syracuse, and what made you want to leave this team?
Being around my brothers. You come in here as a freshman, not knowing anyone, being wide-eyed, not knowing anything's going to happen. And I came in here and made family, right? All these guys on defense, offense, everywhere, really, they're all family to me now. So being able to come back and help lead us, really, to do what I want to do, what we want to do as a team, and that's win the ACC. It's inspiring.
No, Justin Barron talking about coming back for his brothers and wanting to be there for his brothers. And so, you could definitely appreciate that. Listen, in today's world where, like I said, this collegiate free agency has essentially, created for us the opportunity that you don't have to grow. You don't have to go through adversity. You don't have to have personal responsibility. You don't have to build up your game. You don't have to get better. You don't have to listen to a coach. You could just keep running away. And both of these gentlemen decided not to do that, which I really respect. And this is what Damien Alford had to say about why he stayed.
The same thing I asked Justin, just living in the world that we're living with the transfer portal, why continue to be a member of the Orange? Why continue to fight for this team? What makes you believe in this group?
Well, as Justin said, it's the brotherhood. The guys here, they personally pushed me through a lot, like mentally and stuff I've been going through. So just having them by my side, it builds a bond beyond football. So just having them is like I feel like it's a brotherhood that's going to keep on going regardless of where we go. And I'm happy that the guys that I have right now.
So Damien Alford is speaking about that, once again, echoing his teammate Justin Barron, talking about the brotherhood, that connection, right, that they have as a team. When I said why stay together, and their response is because we're a family. We stay together because we're going to do this together. We care about each other, and they have that family connection. So, I definitely love seeing that. We've seen a bunch of people jump into the transfer portal, and folks, it's not just Syracuse. I made mention before, there's times where Syracuse led the ACC. I think it was 2 off seasons ago, I should say, where Syracuse led the ACC in transfers. And that's a tough thing to stomach, right? But at the same time, you look at the fact that it's happening to Alabama. It's happening to Clemson. Alabama had 3 players leave Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday right after their spring game. Clemson's had a bunch of players leave. When you see it happen to the best of the best, the upper echelon programs, I mean, you really sit here and say to yourself, okay, are people transferring out because they hate the team and they hate the system and they don't think that this can be a winning team and this and that? I mean, you could say that, but in the cases of Alabama, you can't. In the case of Alabama, you can't sit here and say, oh, it's because the team stinks. It's because, they have nothing to offer. You can't say that with Alabama and Clemson. You can't say that with, Ohio State sending guys to the NFL the way that they do. Why you would not want to play for a program like that now. And so, and granted, I talk about the Big Ten in the college football playoff and how they have an unfair advantage because they absolutely do. But at the same time, we look at the fact of looking at Ohio State and the guys that they send to the NFL, and that's a different story. To me, that's a totally different story. The guys that they send to the NFL, that's an incredible connection that they've been able to have, and I applaud that and I commend that. There's not a lot of schools that can say that they've done what Ohio State has done as far as sending players to the NFL.
Recording
so
in
there's
progress.
been a lot of good that's come out of these programs, and they still have people leaving their program. So I think it's clear that, college football free agency, collegiate free agency in general, is not simply based on wins and losses, and not simply based on, oh, well, this team, this team's good and this team's okay. It's really based on just this individualistic approach to life that we unfortunately live in America, that has run more rampant because the media, in a lot of ways, not here, but the media in other places and in general has pushed forward this agenda of do everything alone, be by yourself, it's all about you. And that's not how society runs successfully. We do better together than we do apart, but I mean, that's something that unfortunately people have to kind of learn by, trial by error, so to speak. And so we'll see how it goes from here. But the Syracuse Orange football team officially starting camp today. I will be there. I look forward to it. And I look forward to speaking on the upcoming college football season as we take Syracuse and we expand it out to the broader ACC right after this on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, with Alex Dodd coming on the show. Very excited to have Dodd back on the broadcast right after this fast break. In these unique times, there are those in our community that give us a sense of normalcy and positivity. Pizza Man on 50 Oswego Street in Baldwinsville has been here for you for over 35 years and is here now. Call 315-638-1234 or order online at pizzamanbville.com to bring those familiar tastes into your home. And remember to come see our monthly on-site broadcasts centered around the community and our Baldwinsville Bees. Pizza Man in Baldwinsville. Any way you slice it, they're always here for you.
I'm George Townsend of Honda City with some good advice when buying a new car. The true cost of owning a new car is determined by the appraised value when you trade it. No vehicle appraises higher than a Honda. Next, look for low APRs and deep discounts. You also want low maintenance costs and great fuel economy. That's why my advice to you is to buy a new Honda. Looking pre-owned, visit our Honda Certified Used Car Center. Honda City, 7140 Henry Clay Boulevard, Liverpool, or HondaCity-CNY.com.
It would be a pity if you don't shop at Honda City.
Our corporate purpose at Chick-fil-A is to glorify God by being faithful stewards of all that's entrusted to us and to positively influence all those who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. And what became increasingly clear from our success in Cicero is that people love Chick-fil-A. And also I think we recognized that, we had a great opportunity to grow the brand and grow our platform. I felt incredibly grateful when I was selected to be a Chick-fil-A operator. I think what it's meant for me, what I've come to realize on a very deep level, is that this is a calling for me. It's not a career, it's not a job. The Lord called me to be a Chick-fil-A operator and to use these restaurants to glorify Him and to positively influence other people. I'm blessed. I'm very blessed.
Head to Chick-fil-A Clay on 3974 State Route 31 in Liverpool, New York. Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, here where sports meets life. Happy to be hanging out with you, and I cannot believe that it is August, but we're sitting here in August right now, and coming in from Rapid City. Man, that's a little bit of a distance away from me, but excited to have him into the broadcast here with me. And that is Mr. Alex Dodd coming in, hanging out with us where sports meets life, kicking off the ACC football season. And he is kicking off the fact that he just received a very amazing honor out there in Rapid City. So I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let Dodd say it. Good morning, sir, and love for you to share with everybody the good news that you just received.
Yeah, good morning. It's always good to be on Wake Up Call with Dan, and love being on the show. But I guess last week I got promoted to be the sports editor here at the Rapid City Journal, and super excited for the opportunity and to try something new to manage your sports room. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an awesome opportunity, and congratulations to you for that, for the Rapid City Journal. I don't know if they know that what they're getting in having you be the sports editor, but I definitely have known over the years that, you know, wherever you're going to go, you're going to spread a lot of positivity, a lot of faith, a lot of goodness, and you're going to do things in a really special and unique way. So I definitely want to congratulate you on that, because there are people in this world that you root for, and you're one of those people, Dodd.
Appreciate it, Dan. You're one of those people too.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, speaking of rooting for, the ACC, it's kicking off here very, very soon. And I was just talking about the transfer portal, and, you know, the fact that, you know, some people say, well, the transfer portal is there and there's teams that are running, or players that are running out into the transfer portal, into collegiate free agency, because the program's not good, the program's not winning. Well, I was just saying before the break, Alabama had a ton of players leave. They had players leave Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right after the spring game. Clemson has seen numerous players leave. So to me, I really don't think that this is coming down to, and obviously in these cases it's not, whether a program is winning, whether it's a positive pedigree, a college football playoff caliber team. It's not about that anymore. Honestly, it's just become a very individualistic, self-serving world. And not that there's not those cases where a coach lies to a student athlete, or a coach leaves, or something like that happens, but there are these other instances where you look at it and you say, okay, Dabo Swinney recruited these guys, Nick Saban recruited these guys, they come onto this football, you know, these football programs, and Alabama and Clemson have a better shot than most of making it to the college football playoff. When you start seeing a bunch of guys run into the transfer portal from these institutions, it really, you know, begs the question of, is the transfer portal being utilized in the most positive and productive of ways? Or is this really essentially just becoming a place where if you find out after the spring game you're not the starting corner, then you say peace out, Dabo, and you run somewhere else? So I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I mean, DJ Uiagalelei, it didn't work out in Clemson. He's out at Oregon State now. He's come out publicly and given his thoughts on Clemson. So I'd love to get your thoughts on the transfer portal, seeing that the Alabamas and the Clemsons of the world are losing players, and not a couple. They're losing a bunch as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how the transfer portal has played out. I think it played out like a lot of people thought it would.
Yeah.
When you open up this door that anybody can jump into for the hope of a new future, you're going to get whatever you want, whatever you could dream of in football or basketball. Basketball, I mean, it's even worse than it is in college football. But yeah, Clemson's lost a couple guys, or a few guys over the last few years to the transfer portal. They've done a better job than a lot of other teams maybe at not having those guys leave after spring. They've lost some guys in December, but they haven't lost as many guys in March or April.
Yeah.
Or May. So Clemson's done a better job of keeping guys from doing that. But I mean, it really just throws a wrench in your roster management. I mean, it's hard enough to be a college football coach and to make sure you have all your scholarship players. It's even harder when you've got to account for the fact that there are going to be a few guys that are going to leave every year.
Yeah.
And if you're at one of these places where 10 guys leave every year or 15 guys leave every year, it makes it that much more difficult, because how are you supposed to go on the recruiting trail and get the right number of guys to come into your program? Or how are you going to be able to anticipate how many transfers you're going to have to sign when you don't know how many are leaving your own program? So the transfer window, I think, helps a little bit, but there's still, I mean, it's not like the NFL where teams have to get permission to talk to other players that they want to trade for. It's not like that. It's not like free agency. It's the wild, wild west, and we're seeing it play out every year. So it's interesting. I'm not the biggest fan. I agree with you, though. There are situations where it makes sense for guys.
Yeah.
I mean, DJ Uiagalelei is kind of an interesting case. I mean, he's a graduate. He's already got his degree. So that might be a little bit different. But, yeah, it's interesting and not the best.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that there's not enough parameters, and there's no fence built around it. There's no fence built around NIL, and I heard a coach talk about this, and I agree wholeheartedly, of the reality that you can't have the opportunity to transfer being open right after the season ends when people are extremely emotional, and right after spring practice where people are extremely emotional. And by the way, when you look at scheming and whatnot, now I'm thinking as a coach, if I'm Saban and I got 3 guys transferring out of my program right after spring ball from Alabama, they go to Florida, LSU, and Tennessee, there goes my playbook. So, I mean, I'm thinking about that too. I don't feel like you should be able to transfer after the spring. I really don't. And this whole like play right away. So to be able to go through a spring now in a certain situation where a coach leaves or there's some type of very unique thing like a coach throws a chair at a player. I don't know, something just crazy. Then I can understand that. But in my reality, once spring starts, that's the season. And so for you to be able to walk out of a team in April and go to another team and, be running forward on a kickoff in September, I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's good for football. I don't think it's good for collegiate athletics. And, if we don't want this to be professional in what we're, looking at right now, if we don't want this to be a professional model and we don't want this to be free agency, I mean, essentially that's what it's become. That's what it is. There's almost like a trade deadline, right? You come out of the spring and you jump into the portal. You're part of the trade deadline and you get onto another team and here you are, on another kickoff. That's something that I'd love to get your thoughts on. Are these windows that we have, and I can't take credit for it because, like I said, a coach brought it up, but having these emotional moments at the end of the season in December and then having it at the end of spring practice where maybe something didn't go your way, or maybe coach yelled at you the last day of spring practice and that's the last thing you remember and you were embarrassed in front of your parents, and now after the spring game you're just pissed off, you want to leave, or you walked off the field at the bowl game and you feel like they should have handed you the ball and they didn't, and so you want to leave. These emotional times that are open to transferring, would love to get your thoughts on that. And if you feel like it's right that once we officially step into spring ball, which is the following season, if you feel like somebody should be able to leave in April and show up somewhere else in August.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely brings up an interesting point, and, it definitely has taken away somewhat of what was special in college athletics. One of the things that was special about college sports is, as a fan, you knew you were going to have a guy for 4 years. You knew that he was going to be on your team. You knew that you could pull for him. You knew who your players were going to be, and that's just not the case at most places now. So that definitely takes some of the luster away from it. I do think the deadline conversation is interesting because, it's not even like free agency, because free agency at least has rules that govern it, and this unlimited wide open door that guys are able to go out of, and a lot of guys get stuck in the portal too, is another thing that people oftentimes forget, is just because you go in the portal doesn't mean that you're going to sign somewhere. You can go into the portal and never come out. So that's something a lot of these guys don't think about. I almost think, along with some more structure to the transfer portal, that these schools need to have people who are giving these kids neutral, good advice. And I don't know, maybe through NCAA compliance or whatever, to just tell the guys the risks and what can happen when you jump in the transfer portal and don't sign somewhere. Because, like college basketball season, when there were 2,000 something guys in the portal, and there weren't that many spots on rosters because people are still signing high school kids. And they're still signing junior college kids. So that's another interesting part of it. But it like you're saying, with having guys be able to jump in these emotional time periods, especially after spring practice, when a guy's able to jump in the portal after spring practice, it makes a coach's job 10 times more difficult in terms of roster management, because you're not signing new guys after spring practice from high school. You can hopefully you can get your transfers before that deadline as well. So it's a mess, and the NCAA I don't even know what they could do about it, or if the schools would even listen. If the NCAA tried to add some enforcement, because that's a whole nother conversation. What's happening with the NCAA, and I don't envy those guys' situation in trying to tell, especially these Power Five, these autonomous five conferences, what to do.
Well, speaking here with Alex Dodd, sports editor of Rapid City Journal, and as we talk about college football and getting into the ACC here in a second, you say you don't envy them, but they put, not that the new faces coming in did this, but the NCAA as an institution put themselves in this position. Their consistently inconsistent behavior, which I warned, and I said this, and I think now we are at 5 years. I said 5 years ago, within the next 5 to 10 years, we will see the NCAA either drastically change or cease to exist. And we're in a place right now, 5 years after I said that, where they have tried to put out a new constitution, figure out who they are, find new leadership, and are still trying to understand what they're supposed to do right now. I mean, they let things run rampant. They gave certain institutions preferential treatment. They did this to themselves. The California passes a law, right? And the rest of the country goes, okay, good for you. And then the NCAA says, okay, well, what do you guys think? We don't care. You're all going to have to be open to it. And at the time that I was researching it, I think there was 9 states of 50 that had some type of plan in place for NIL. And there was 41 other states that either didn't agree with it, didn't know about it, didn't understand it, were trying to figure out, what type of law that they could pass, what legislation they could have. So when you have more than half the country, I don't even care if it was 49 said yes and one of them didn't understand it. When the whole country isn't kind of on board with it and we're trying to figure things out, this is a question that I continue to ask and no one's given me an answer, and I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. If states have rights, how did the NCAA circumnavigate the entire governmental system in America and tell 50 states who have their own rights within their borders that they all have to abide by the NCAA when the NCAA is not the national government?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're seeing that play out very clearly right now. The NCAA is essentially deferred to the states on NIL legislation, and you're never in a good situation. I think I may have said this on your show before. You're never in a good situation as a nonprofit where you're going and lobbying the federal government to take control over what you allegedly control. Yeah. And that's what the NCAA is doing. They're lobbying the federal government to implement federal laws to control NIL because they have no say over what the states are going to do. And I mean, the landscape is not balanced. I mean, it's never been balanced per se in college football. There have always been teams that, have a bigger appeal, and, the rich kind of get richer in college football. It's never been exactly level, but there's always the possibility of a school finding a way to put things together to rise up to the top. And it's making that a lot more difficult now with NIL when you have states like Texas and Alabama where the schools can essentially fundraise for the NIL collectives and pay the players, and it circumnavigate the process of making student athletes employees. So you have that in some states, and then you have other states like Clemson can't do that. South Carolina's NIL legislation doesn't allow the schools to fundraise for the NIL collectives. They'd be completely separate. That wasn't built into the law when they shoehorned it through as soon as they possibly could when all this broke out. So it's really interesting. I don't know what the NCAA can do because of exactly what you're saying. The states have rights to adopt actual laws, and the NCAA doesn't. And talking about the NCAA and their unfair punishment of teams, I mean, you don't have to look much farther than what's happening with Michigan right now. Yeah. And I talked about it on a show I have with Will Vandervoort that we do on Thursdays called Off the Cuff. You can find it on my Twitter. But maybe Jim Harbaugh would have been better if he didn't actually buy those recruits burgers and just gave them burger bags full of cash like Tennessee did, because Tennessee didn't get any punishment essentially for what they did. And Jim Harbaugh buys a couple kids a burger when he's talking to him, and he's going to get suspended for 4 games most likely. So,
Yeah.
it's who's running the circus.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is who wants to, and that decision making. I mean, listen, it's not rocket science. It's just the reality. And I had a few issues with this. I mean, with it not being rocket science, you just need somebody who's competent. You need somebody who doesn't owe anybody anything. Essentially, the president of the NCAA has become a politician. They owe somebody something, so they can't make certain rules happen, right? We can't punish Kentucky. You can't touch John Calipari. However, we're going to come after St. Bonaventure in upstate New York because we think they're doing some naughty business. I mean,
and the president of the NCAA is literally a politician. Charlie Baker was the governor of Massachusetts. And it's become an office that I don't know how it could be held by somebody that's not a politician, because they need the federal government in order to continue to exist. All it's going to take to end the NCAA is, a school bringing the right case before a judge to sue the NCAA for infringement. And that's how NIL happened, was the NCAA getting taken to court.
Right.
And that's all that's going to have to happen for the NCAA to completely end, is for them to rub the wrong school or the wrong group of schools the wrong way, and for them to have a solid enough case to take it before a judge.
I mean, I'm waiting for that day, and I said this 2 years ago at least. I'm waiting for the day for the NCAA to say something to the SEC and the SEC to just do this. Are you talking to us? Did you say something to us? Because
Who?
I think the SEC
Who?
is on their way out. I think they're leaving. I've said this 2 years ago. I think the SEC is going to form their own league. I think there's going to be a college football playoff 1 and a college football playoff 2. I think the college football playoff 1 will either be SEC or SEC Big Ten, even though I don't think the Big Ten deserves to be in it. And then I think from that, and when I say deserves to be in it, they don't have enough selling point. The SEC, with Alabama, with hopefully a Florida team getting better, with LSU, as well as Auburn, Georgia, Kentucky. I mean, they're expanding, Oklahoma and Texas. There's so many things that the SEC can do. They really don't need anybody. And the Big Ten has preferential treatment into the college football playoff, but they don't do anything with it. Ohio State barely does anything with it. Michigan barely does anything with it. So to me, and bringing in UCLA and USC, it's just ridiculous, because I think about the Olympic sports. Are you going to be driving a bus for women's soccer 2,000 miles? Are you going to be are you going to be chartering field hockey? Because we know why they did it. They did it for football, maybe a little bit for basketball. And, I think what the Big Ten did, in my opinion from the outside, is I feel like if you look at a map, and I did a map show last year where I just broke down everything by actually looking at the map and talking about the conferences. The SEC is southern, middle, southeast. So you have that circle, right? And then you have the Big Ten circle, and they touch each other, so they have the north and south of the middle of the country to the east. And then when you go off to the west, they pull in UCLA and USC. So I think that their argument is, hey, if you let us come with you, we'll have representation from the majority of the country. If we can get Notre Dame to come in, we'll have all these SEC schools. We'll have Notre Dame. We'll have Penn State. We'll have Ohio State. We'll have Michigan. We'll have USC, UCLA. People are going to consider us to be the championship. And then there'll be a college football playoff too, with the ACC and the Pac-12, whatever Pac number it's going to be. The Big 12, which is now the Big 13, because they continue to confuse the situation. And, the American Athletic and so on and so forth. I think there's going to be 3 tiers. And you'll see in a show coming up that I had with an American Athletic Conference coach, we had this conversation. He didn't know that I had said it. I didn't know he was thinking it. And he said to me, there's going to be 3 tiers of college football. And there's going to be that tier where the SEC breaks free, at least. Then there'll be that tier of the other FBS, and then there'll be the FCS still. So instead of 1A AA, it'll be essentially 1A AA AAA, and that's where we're going to be sitting at. I'd love to get your thoughts on it, Dodd, because it seems like the world is moving in that direction, and the NCAA is in a place right now where I talked to John Swofford about this multiple times many years ago. I said, John, your autonomy, that the name that you chose as 5 conferences, the Pac-12, the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC, and the ACC, it's not a mistake that you chose autonomy, which is self-governing. You're essentially a sleeping giant in the midst of the NCAA, and at any given time, legislatively, you can leave. Legally, you're an autonomy group. Have you thought about it? And he told me flat out, yeah, we've discussed it as commissioners. We're not going to do it right now, but it's not that it's out of the realm of possibility. Well, here we are, fast forward a bunch of years. The NCAA's lost its mind more. The NIL is where it is. Transfer portal is going on. Pay for play is a normal thing in America. Coaches are texting players saying, jump in the portal so I can pay you this much money. I don't think we're that far off from seeing the world of the autonomy group, or at least a portion of it. And that's why I think 10 years later, there's been so much movement in realignment, because I think the Big 12, the Big 10 are trying to attract the SEC into letting them be a part of whatever this treehouse is going to be.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think you're wrong. I don't know if it's going to take very long. I mean, it could be the next 5 years before you start seeing this movement happen. I mean, you're already seeing it is the movement even done? That's the big question.
Probably not.
Because I think we got to a point last year where we were like, oh, maybe, and the year before, we also got to a point where we're like, oh, maybe this movement's kind of done. But are we done? Are we even done in this cycle with the realignment in college football? And I'm not so sure that we are. I mean, you got to think about these schools that are in the ACC, or even worse, these schools that are in the Pac-12. They're looking at the revenue numbers, and they're seeing what the Big Ten schools are getting. And you're seeing what the SEC schools are going to get from ESPN with Oklahoma and Texas. And it's just, the discrepancy is too much for these athletic directors to wrap their minds around. And yeah, there's things that make the ACC different than the Big Ten. There are things that make the ACC different than the SEC. But do schools care as much about these intangible things, or do they want to see the dollars on paper to better their entire athletic department? And I think I don't know if the Big Ten is quite done with the moves it's going to try to make. I think that the Big 12, adding Colorado, adding BYU, I think the Big 12 has done its best job to try to stay relevant and in this future second tier by adding the schools that they did. Yeah, they're not Oklahoma and Texas. You didn't add those big names. Those are the ones you lost. But you were able to add a Colorado team that has some traditional ties to the region. You were able to add a BYU team that's had success in the past. They have the history, but they also have a really big fan base that's going to watch their games every week. So I think that was a good move by the Big 12. But I think we're definitely heading towards a multi-tiered college football system. I mean, even the Power 5 is not going to be a thing in 5 or 6 years or 10 years. It could take longer than we think it is. I mean, we're always doom and gloom, I guess, as sports writers, waiting for the next thing to happen. But we're definitely moving in that direction. Yeah. The question is, how long is it going to take? How much longer can schools continue to bite the bullet of making half of what schools in another conference are before they become irrelevant in this conversation? When the SEC is going to be able to have teams with 2 losses or 3 losses making the college football playoff when it expands, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, we all saw the schedules for 2024 in the SEC, and you can't tell me that if Alabama loses to Oklahoma and to LSU, that they're not going to still be in the conversation to make an expanded playoff, because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And in these other conferences like the ACC, where you're not going to be playing those games, you're still in the same situation with making the playoff that you were before. You have room to lose 1 game. Maybe you have room to lose 2 games if those 2 games are Notre Dame and Florida State, or Notre Dame and Clemson, or whatever. Yeah. Maybe that's the room you have to lose 2 close games. But that margin for error in those Power 2 conferences that we're talking about is getting thinner.
Well, yeah,
so what are these other schools going to do to keep up?
Yeah, and you bring up that, and I spoke with North Carolina Tar Heels head football coach Mac Brown, and I asked him, and I said, where, you've been You've been in this conference more than once, and you have been a sports analyst looking at this conference from that viewfinder. What are your thoughts on the state of the ACC? And he said repeatedly, we need more money. I mean, when Mac Brown in North Carolina, when an integral piece of your identity is saying, we need to figure out how to make more money. You know, I mean, that's not a good place to be in. If I'm Jim Phillips and I'm hearing Mac Brown say that on a podium, if Mac Brown says that, if Dabo Swinney says that, I need to listen. You know, and I still feel like if the Pac and the ACC have a conversation, and I told people this before, there's like a backing into the SEC thing that I don't know if the ACC sees. And I'm going to say it publicly and be like, hey, Jim Phillips, because I think Jim, I love Jim. I love, you know, so many things that he brings to the table. Jim and ACC, hear me on this. If you open up your contract talks and your TV rights, and because you have that grant of rights till 2036, if you open up the conversation and you break a contract or diminish or dissolve a contract to speak with the Pac-12 about their future, whatever, I think that there could be, in the legislative world, if you open up those rights to have that conversation, that could open up your grant of rights to blowing things up. And I think that the SEC is kind of waiting for the ACC to make a bad chess move and to be looking in one direction and not the other. And then essentially are going to put themselves in a position where they may say, okay, you know what, let's open these contract talks over here. So then you dissolve this over here and you break that open. And now Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and so on and so forth, the SEC can talk to them without having to worry about the grant of rights. So I think the ACC has to be really careful with what contracts they dissolve and what contracts they're opening themselves up to, because there could be a loophole situation where you back into the SEC by accident. There's also something else we heard, you know, Dodd, about, and this is something I didn't know before this year, that if the majority of the ACC schools say that they want to leave, they can break the grant of rights by majority rule. So allegedly, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, FSU, Miami, Florida State, or pardon me, I said that already, Clemson. So, and then I think they have, what is it? Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and NC State. So they had 7. If they could get one other school, be it a Louisville, they can break the grant of rights on the ACC, which we have been told up until now was unbreakable. So what are your thoughts on either them opening their conversation television talks and backing into the SEC by accident, or a majority rule saying we're going to dissolve the grant of rights because 8 of us are considering leaving?
Well, yeah, no, both those situations are definitely in play. We saw that during the ACC spring meetings. All the news coming out from there about, you know, how fun of a situation that was while Dabo was on a safari in South Africa. So both of those situations are definitely in play. But I think you have a third option that people aren't talking as much. And the third option is these schools say, we're leaving and you can take us to court. And they wait for this to play out in court. We know how long legal situations like that take to play out. And if a legal process takes 3 or 4 years, is the ACC even going to be able to have the money to fight it in court?
Right.
In this situation, if they have if 4 of those schools leave, if Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina leave, does the ACC have the gumption? Do they have the funds to be able to fight that in court? But the other thing is, you never know what's going to happen when you take that before a judge. Is a judge going to look at this TV contract that limits these schools to making half as much as the SEC is going to make? Are they going to be able to look at that and say that the conference is acting in the best interest of their schools?
Right.
It's hard for me to think that a judge would look at that on paper and say that the ACC is acting in the best interest of all of its institutions, with a grant of rights that locks you in until 2036. That may have been. It's going to be interesting if that does happen or when it happens. if what people are going to look back and say about John Swofford and the grant of rights deal, which seemed like when the ACC made it was a good deal, that it was going to keep these schools together. I mean, when it happened, there weren't a lot of people who were saying that this is a bad deal. Most people were saying that it was a good deal. But in 2036, is the conference even going to be in play? Is it going to exist in the same way that it does? Is it going to be in the second tier of college football? It's going to be interesting to say. I'm also glad that you brought up the Olympic sports, because that is a variable that gets left out of this conversation, and not as much for what the Olympic sports. I don't think it's as complicated what it means for the Olympic sports in the Big Ten or the SEC. If they continue expanding and they're making all this money, I think that they're going to have enough money in the budget to be able to pay for those schools to travel still, or they'll be playing in pods, regional pods, at that point if expansion continues. But what's it going to mean in that second tier? It's going to look a heck of a lot like it does in the FCS, or like it does in Division II, or like it does in the Group of Five at that point. When your revenue is so much less than these other conferences, you're going to have to super regionalize in order to keep those things afloat. So it's interesting how it's going to play off. But I think the biggest thing in that conversation is that third option for these ACC schools. Are they just going to go and say, let's see where the chips fall?
Yeah.
So
well,
we'll see.
That's what somebody else had said to me. They said, listen, I mean, if they just decide to leave and they say fight us in court, do they, how much money do they have and how much time do they want to spend on it? And at the end of the day, if these schools don't want to be with you, right, can are you really just going to force them to stay? But I mean, Alex, did you think that you or I, when we met years and years, almost a decade ago, did you think that we would ever be talking about an ACC that maybe could not exist at some point?
No, I mean, I think it was really hard to fathom that during the last. I mean, because when you and I met was right after the ACC had made this big move to add Syracuse and Louisville and kind of Notre Dame. That was around the time period that we met. So I think at that point, the ACC had made a good move. They were on the offensive. And now it seems like the ACC has moved from that offensive category to the defensive category. And you bring up Jim Phillips. I'm watching the ACC football kickoff while it's going on last week. And, I mean, it really, and last year the same thing, during the Commissioners Forum, it seemed like Jim Phillips was living in an alternate reality with what he was saying from the podium. When you get up and sing Kumbaya, and it's publicly reported that it's not that friendly in those meetings, or not even that it's not friendly. I'm sure all those guys like each other, but that all of these other things are happening behind the scenes. And it's been reported. People know that it's happening, that the schools are going to the conference office to review the grant of rights. It's been reported. We know that this is a thing. So it's interesting when Jim Phillips gets up and, it's great to talk about all the championships that the ACC won in Olympic sports. I think it's awesome. I love Olympic sports. I love softball. I love watching soccer. Syracuse has had a lot of success in soccer. I think they just came out with the poll today, and Syracuse was in the preseason soccer poll was ranked number 1. But I love the Olympic sports.
Yeah.
But I mean, you got to address reality at some point from that podium. And it was just interesting to hear what he had to say. I mean, last year he was talking about the gated communities, and then this year I don't even understand what reality he was talking about when he stood up at the podium.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, like I said, I definitely, I appreciate his faith, and I appreciate, the man behind, the man that I've met and I've gotten to talk to, one-on-one. At the same juncture, when I look at last year and I look at this year, I had this same statement last year that I had this year going into the ACC kickoff. My statement last year was the worst action is inaction. My statement this year is the worst action is inaction. And I asked him that, and there's going to be a one-on-one conversation between myself and the commissioner that'll be airing next week on Wake Up Call, where I addressed that with him. Are we looking at expanding? With the Big 12, the Pac-12, the SEC, and the Big 10 either being poached from or poaching or both, you're the only conference in the alleged Power 5 that hasn't made a move. Was that the right decision? And because I think they should have went for... Now, I don't want the American to lose anybody. If they were going to, I think the ACC should have went after UCF. I mean, there's certain things that I think would have made sense for the ACC to do. They didn't do those things. And so, now we're in a place where I really honestly do think the worst action is inaction. It's kind of this like, what are we going? We're just kind of watching everybody else. You know what I mean? And I don't now. I understand you have the grant of rights, but when you're just watching, I think the way that you try and pull things in and do things. I mean, look at what the American Athletics doing. They have a contract with ESPN, right? And something comes up and they're negotiating and they're trying to build more. And now they have an opportunity to build again and they're bringing in these 6 institutions. The American Athletic has as many schools as the ACC. Now, I'm not trying to say that it's the same pedigree as Clemson or the North Carolinas and this and that, but I'm looking at the region of the American Athletic Conference. American Athletic Conference is in Alabama. They're all over Texas. They're in Florida. They have gone into Carolina. There's all of these places that they're taking that are in the same it's the same model as the SEC plus Navy and Temple. They're taking those same states. They're taking big time markets. They lost Houston, they gained Rice. They still have Houston, Texas. They have Charlotte, North Carolina. They have a place in Alabama now in Birmingham. There's the cities that they're in, like the Charlottes and the Houstons, are some of the fastest growing cities in America. The American Athletic is very strategic in what they've done. And the Sun Belt has made some strategic moves. So I'm looking at the ACC saying, what's the strategy? What's the plan? What are you going to do? Because I think that it's clear with the college football playoff, well, at least at 4, that they have no interest in anybody coming out of the ACC that's not named Clemson. I think if Wake Forest went undefeated in recent history, I think they still would have tried to argue them out. Small school, not going to sell a lot of tickets for us. I don't think we can do it. Now, is that fair to Dave Clawson? Absolutely not. Is it fair to the Demon Deacons? Absolutely not. But I think the College Football Playoff Committee has made very clear their stance. If it ain't Big Ten or the SEC or it's not named Clemson or Notre Dame, guess what, honey? Maybe we'll put you in, but we're going to leave you down the line a little bit. And when they expand to 12, the American will hopefully have a spot. But I don't know if expanding to 12 is going to give the ACC anything more than Clemson. I don't know. I don't know in the last 10 years, and I never thought I'd say this ever. The SEC was here, and I thought the ACC was pushing right under it when I started covering the ACC a decade ago. Very, closely. What the ACC was and what they are right now is they went from being one of the top conferences, top 2 maybe, to now being in a place where I wonder if the ACC is even in the discussion when the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the SEC sit down in this in this autonomy group. I wonder if they're even calling the Pac-12 and the ACC to come to lunch and have that meeting.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. And the other thing is, if we think about the reasons why Jim Phillips was brought in as the next commissioner of the ACC, a big one was his Notre Dame ties, probably the biggest one. And he made it clear again this year. I think everybody already knew at this point that Notre Dame option looks less and less viable every year.
Oh yeah.
In terms of the ACC being aggressive instead of passive in this realignment conversation. So that was why he was brought in. That was what the presidents and chancellors wanted from Jim Phillips, was to go get Notre Dame. He has ties to the school. He has good relationships with them. He's been there. That was the reason. And now it's becoming more and more clear that that's not going to happen. And you wonder what moves would actually benefit the revenue conversation.
Yeah.
At this point, the big revenue schools, unless you're going to go get somebody from the SEC or the Big Ten, which isn't going to happen, the big revenue schools are, I mean, they're pretty much off the table unless you can go raid the Pac-12 as it's in its disaster of a situation, which I think the Pac-12 situation is worse than the ACC's at this point.
Oh yeah.
But who knows what's going to happen in another year or two? It could be in the same boat. But I mean, signing a TV deal with the CW, adding a revenue share, eliminating divisions. Yeah, these are all good things. I think the schools are happy with it, but how much is that going to do to keep those schools from looking for ways to get out of the grant of rights? I don't think a lot.
No, and I think ultimately, with the SEC becoming so big, I think that they're going to go to 20. If not, they're going to go to 18. And Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina is going to disappear because they have way too many teams already. I don't think we're going to see those matchups anymore unless they join the SEC, because the SEC really doesn't have to play non-conference games anymore. I mean, their games that they're going to have within their conference itself, they don't have. There's teams they're not going to see for years, and so to me, I feel like they have to. Florida State, and listen, I don't think Florida State's off the table. I don't think Clemson's off the table. I don't think Miami is off the table. North Carolina would be strange, but it was also strange when Mac Brown was very clear, and like I said in my response, money. We need more money. We have to find ways to make more money. I'm looking at the money. What is the conference going to do to get the money? And that sat with me in a certain type of way, because I feel like when you talk about being in that ACC room and having those conversations, a Mac Brown in that room probably holds a lot of weight. And I would venture to say that your Carolinian schools, this conference has been built from the inside out, and there's a lot of emphasis always on the North Carolina schools and then obviously Clemson. So I think at this point, I think Florida State and Miami, they're free agents. And I do believe that. If Clemson were to leave, then that's the death to me of the ACC. I mean, there's no other way to get in. You start to drop off in a way. I mean, Syracuse, where are they going to go, right? Pitt can be somewhat enticing to a Big Ten because of Pitt and Penn State, and because Pitt sends a bunch of guys to the NFL, and Pitt's a lot better than people give him credit for. Pat Narduzzi's been a great coach in 8 years. Well, this being his 8th. So, I think Pitt has some value to it of the teams that could remain. I think a Wake Forest, it behooves them to stay. It behooves the NC State to stay. But, we're looking at schools that can go elsewhere, and there's a bunch of those schools that I think are going to be able to find a way. And I think the Big 12 could make a play for Virginia and say, hey, you know what? We need some help in basketball. Tony Bennett's a fantastic coach. I mean, we could have Kansas and Virginia in the same conference. So, I think the ACC has to really understand that this whole stand pat and wait is not going to work out, because I think eventually one of these conferences is going to turn their sights to you and say, okay, we've eaten everybody else. We're still hungry. And the ACC, like you said, if you're not on the offensive, you're on the defensive. The ACC was this giant that just grabbed the Big East, ripped it apart, and pulled from it whatever it wanted. The ACC looked untouchable. Now the ACC looks like the opposite. They look like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Rocket Raccoon, cowling in that cage, seeing that giant hand of realignment reaching out for them right now.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case. And I think Clemson and Florida State, there's a special relationship that's been formed, particularly over this grant of rights, that these are two schools with similar interests.
Yeah.
They bring championships and revenue to the conference in a way that other schools don't at the moment. So I think there's a special relationship there. So I would be shocked if whatever happens, if those two schools aren't in lockstep, if Clemson and Florida State don't move as one into whatever the next venture is. I also, about the rivalry conversation, I was talking to somebody about this last week. To me, it seems like, obviously during the COVID year, the SEC opted to play the conference-only schedule. And I think that after that the SEC understood that there's still value to those rivalry games. There's also another part of this conversation with the SEC and not adding an additional game to the conference schedule that they want, Disney and ESPN to ante up for that other game. So I think that it seems like they do see value in those regional rivalry games. I mean, I couldn't imagine a world where Clemson and South Carolina don't play every year. Now, I could imagine a world in conference realignment where Clemson and South Carolina play in week 1 instead of playing in week 12. That is not out of the realm of possibility that happens.
Yeah.
Or that Florida and Florida State, same thing. That seems very much in the realm of possibility to me. But I couldn't imagine a world where those schools don't play each other. And I think if it comes to a point where these rivalry games aren't being able to be played, which we've already reached that point in a lot of places. But now some of them are coming back. I mean, even with the moves the SEC made, they brought back some traditional rivalries, Texas A&M, namely. But I don't see a world where those games don't happen. And maybe that's painful optimism on my part. But, Clemson, Florida State, I think they're in lockstep. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, this is stuff that could happen in 3 weeks. It could happen in 3 years. It could happen in 2036.
Yeah.
But I think if you wait until 2036, the landscape is going to be so different that you're going to be left behind.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think, like we talked about, I think the grant of rights was meant to provide a level of protection that other conferences don't have. But I think what you've realized is you might have as much as great of a fortress as you think you have built, but if the people within the castle don't want to be there, as great as that fortress is, what is it if the people within that fortress are not looking to be protected from the rest of the world but want to actually go out into it? So I mean, this is kind of like Rapunzel, right? Are Clemson and Florida State letting down their hair, saying, "Let me out of this castle, get me out of this place"? So, we shall see. But before I let you go, Alex Dodd here with me and the sports editor, very proud to be able to say that in Rapid City for the Rapid City Journal. Before I let you go, the ACC preseason poll came out. This is the first time we're seeing the ACC sans division since they had this giant realignment here and over the last decade, right? So as we look at this, I do want to remind everybody that a few years ago, if there were no divisions, Clemson and Syracuse would have played for the ACC championship. But as we look at it right now, Clemson was voted number 1 in the preseason poll. Spoiler alert, everybody. I'm sure you didn't know that was coming. Florida State was number 2, which I prognosticated. North Carolina, number 3. Interesting. NC State, number 4. Miami, even though they fumbled the ball the last couple of years, they were voted number 5. Tied for 6th, Duke and Pitt. So Pitt gaining some traction and respect here. Louisville, who has a new head coach, and they've been kind of wobbly. They got 8. Wake Forest got 9. And Syracuse got 10. Virginia Tech 11. Georgia Tech 12. Boston College 13. Virginia 14, as Virginia has lost their quarterback and over the last couple seasons also lost their offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. So what are your thoughts on the preseason poll, where I don't think we're surprised in 1 and 2, but there's a lot of other pieces to this media poll where I'm going, yeah, I don't think we agree on that.
Yeah, no, probably. Yeah, I agree with you. Number 1 and number 2 are what I thought. Now, I thought maybe that gap would be a little bit shorter, just with the way that people have talked about Florida State in this offseason. I thought maybe that gap between Clemson and Florida State would be a little bit more narrow. I mean, in terms of points it is, but in terms of first place votes, it's really not. But I thought maybe it would be a little tighter there. And the one that surprises me the most on this list is probably Pitt, tied for 6th. I think a lot of people in the ACC are going to be surprised by Pitt this year. And I'm not sure why people are going to be surprised, because if you watch Pitt last year, it's not like there was this massive drop-off after Kenny Pickett and those guys left. I mean, Pitt was still Pitt last year. They were not too far out of the conversation of being in that ACC championship game. And I think they're going to be better this year. Obviously, they lose Abanikanda, and he's a heck of a running back. but they bring a lot of pieces back off that team. And Pat Narduzzi, if he's done one thing at Pitt in his tenure there, is be consistent. So I would be shocked if Pitt actually finishes 6th in the conference. I could see Pitt. I can see a universe, and I talked about this last week with Will Vandervoort, that I can see a world where Pitt ends up in the ACC championship game instead of Florida State. That doesn't seem like – that wouldn't shock me. I wouldn't be scratching my head wondering how Pitt was able to do it. Florida State's got to go there, and they've got to go to Clemson. So Pitt has some schedule advantages that I think they could end up in that championship game. The bottom of the conference, I feel like the gap between these teams from 8 to 11 in particular, I feel like that gap between those teams isn't that much. But Wake Forest 9th,
yeah,
with everything that Dave Clawson's been able to do at Wake Forest.
Nobody respect. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people just don't respect it, and it drives me nuts because
this isn't your daddy's Wake Forest team.
No, he's been there for a decade, and I mean, I don't understand what else he has to do.
I know Sam Hartman's gone, and Sam Hartman is a heck of a quarterback, and I think he's going to do great things at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But man, it's just hard for me to see Pitt at 6th and Wake Forest at 9th in these standings.
Agreed.
NC State getting a first place vote too is a little interesting. I mean, it's not as crazy as, if somebody would have voted Louisville to win the conference. It's not that crazy. Yeah. But NC State to get a first place vote, I don't know. I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think Dave Doran gets the respect he deserves. I don't know why. I've become like a speaker on behalf of NC State and Wake Forest because I don't get it. I think Pitt gets disrespect in the conference because this conference is filled with majority media coming from the Carolinas, and I just don't think that they research Pitt. I don't feel like people know information on Pitt. I remember sitting at a table with people 2 years in Eric Dungy being a quarterback, people asking me if he was good at all. And I was like, can you watch a game of Syracuse? Like any game. Pick a game. I mean, when they stink, he's great. When they're good, he's still great. When he's injured, they're horrible. And, Syracuse being 10th, I guess I can hang my hat on the fact that my hometown wasn't picked 14th this year or 13th, as would be the.
But Syracuse has a ton of weapons coming back this year.
Right.
Obviously at the quarterback position, but the wide receiver room there. Dino we trust, right? Everybody loves Dino. And the way that he's been able to navigate this roster management piece has been interesting to watch because, there's so much turnover that happens at a school like Syracuse, but Dino's found a way to make it work, to put the pieces together to be competitive. Syracuse went to the Valley, and man, Clemson was a dog's hair away from losing that game.
More than once. Yeah,
multiple times.
If Syracuse has played any team well since joining the ACC, outside of the first few years, let's say like the last 4-5 years, Clemson. They played Clemson well in Death Valley. They played Clemson well at home. They beat Clemson when they were the reigning national champion, ranked 2nd in the country. So, you're looking at this list, Clemson, Florida State. Yeah, obviously I agree with that. North Carolina, I think that Pitt, I think that Miami, I think that NC State, I think arguably potentially Wake Forest could climb up that chart above North Carolina this season. I look at Louisville in the middle. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think Wake Forest. Either. I think Wake Forest below Louisville and below Duke, and arguably below Miami and NC State. I don't get the we don't need to cover Wake Forest. We don't need to care about Wake Forest. Dave Clawson can't get it done. I don't understand the mentality of it. And so, them being at number 9 when I can argue them to 3 through 5 doesn't make sense to me. Virginia Tech, Brent Pry, we'll see what he can do there. And I do believe that he is building something. I think in Virginia, with Tony Elliott, I mean, you don't never underestimate a team that's gone through something tragic together. I mean, there's something to be said about the energy and the uplifting that can come out of something terrible, something beautiful being born out of that. So I don't think I would have put Virginia. I mean, I don't put Virginia 14th in mine. And Boston College, Jeff Healy, I mean, he's done some, or Jeff Hafley, pardon me, he's done some good things too with that team. So, I mean, I know you got to put somebody at the bottom, but outside of 1 and 2, I think that Pitt got disrespected in the preseason poll. I think that Wake Forest got disrespected. I think in maybe some respects here with Syracuse, they got disrespected as to being a double-digit team here at number 10, where I think that they're going to end above that. And I think that, again, this conference has really leaned on North Carolina and Miami. And in the last couple of years, I mean, with Miami, we, the ACC media's majority has thought Miami's going to be good, and they disappointed. And they also thought that about North Carolina and Mac Brown, and there's a drop-off last year too. So I think it's like, when push comes to shove, pick the teams you're used to picking. And I think that Pitt and Wake Forest and some of these other teams are kind of been left on the cutting room floor to a media poll where I think sometimes people go chalk and they just keep saying, okay, Miami didn't do it last year or the year before, but they're going to do it this year, instead of finally saying the Wake Forest deserves it.
I just think you got to show me something.
Yeah.
You got to show me that you can be that team.
Right. And they have.
Yeah, I know that Miami was able to do that in 2001. But what have they been able to do since they joined the conference? I mean, they made it to the ACC championship game once and they got embarrassed. Yeah. So you got to show me. And Miami didn't show me anything last year to say that they could be this high. Now, maybe this year they put all the pieces together. They were close in some games last year. But there were a lot of other games where they weren't. Yeah. I mean, they got embarrassed on their home turf by Middle Tennessee. So you got to show me before I'm going to put you this high in the poll. Some of these schools have shown me something. Some of these schools have not. I mean, Duke, we haven't even talked about Duke. I mean, I think what Mike Elko's building at Duke is something that they haven't seen since the days of Steve Spurrier being in Durham. So it is interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out on the field. I like the no divisions. Yeah. I know, a couple coaches don't, but everybody else seems to like it except for Dabo and Mac Brown. But I get it. I get why somebody wouldn't like it, but I'm excited for it to see what happens when we come around in December.
Yeah, and so we shall see as we step forward here, kicking off the college football season in the ACC. Speaking on a lot of big topics here with Alex Dodd, I think we covered more in an hour's time than maybe the NCAA has covered in a couple of years. So with that being said, Dodd, Rapid City
Low bar.
Rapid City Journal, big shout out to you, and being the sports editor, shout out to your show that you've started here off the cuff as well. And definitely always look forward to having you back whenever we can do that.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Dan. Always good to be on the program.
All right, man. Be well and God bless as always.
Absolutely. You too.
Take care. That coming here from Alex Dodd on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. We covered a lot there. That was, see, conversations like that, there's meat, right? There's so much meat to the conversation. And that's what, to me, that's what my show is all about. What's up, Will? How are you, sir? Good to hear from you here on the feed. God bless. Hope you and the family are doing well. Can't wait to see you. Some places you go and you get a sub and there's more bread than meat. Well, on Wake Up Call, we're all about filling that sandwich and giving you your money's worth. We're putting that meat in the sandwich, right? We're not putting little tiny slabs. No, we're filling it up like an Italian family. We're making sure you got enough meat that if half of it falls out, you got sandwiches for a week. That's what Wake Up Call is, the meat of the sandwich. We'll take a step aside for our final fast break, wrap up the show right after this, where sports meets life on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Thanks for being with us. Avicoli's, located on the corner of Route 57 and Wetzel Road in Liverpool, New York, has been your trusted neighbor for decades. Located just steps from Liverpool High School, we're happy to have the Liverpool Warriors on-site, on-location broadcast at Avicoli's through Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora every single month, featuring student athletes, coaches, and administration throughout the year from Liverpool High School. Head out to Avicoli's today on the corner of Route 57 and Wetzel Road in Liverpool, New York. Open Tuesday through Sunday for lunch, dinner, and drinks. We'd love to see you out there. And of course, you can call them at 315-622-5100 for takeout, delivery, and catering. That's 315-622-5100. And also find them on myavicolis.com. That's myavicollis.com. Having peace of mind when you're out of town that your furry-loving friend is safe and sound means taking them to Canine Campground, because we all know that when it comes to the love of our pets, it goes well beyond the call of duty to make sure they're safe and sound. Right, Lily? So take a ride to 242 Johnson Street in East Syracuse, New York, and see Canine Campground and where your dog will be staying in the classic cabin, the executive cabin, the grand cabin, or of course the luxury cabin, because if you know Lily, you know she loves luxury. Now you don't have to wait to the last minute to find a family member or a friend that'll take your dog for a few days. Call Canine Campground at 315-299-4013. That's 315-299-4013. Their drop-off and pickup times are Monday through Sunday. Check K9campground.com for more information. That's the letter K, the number 9, and campground spelled with a K.com. K9campground.com.
When you're going out of town, bring your dog to Canine Campground.
PB&J's Lunchbox, the food truck that you love finding all throughout Central and Upstate New York, now has a streetside cafe. So when you're craving their traditional favorites as well as their out-of-box amazing menu items, you can now head to 663 Old Liverpool Road in Liverpool, New York. Located just minutes from the highway, the Thruway, Destiny USA, and Onondaga Lake Parkway, PB&J's Lunchbox Streetside Cafe is there for you Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner all throughout the day. Get breakfast for dinner, dinner for lunch, whatever you fancy, including their award-winning grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Find them at 663 Old Liverpool Road in Liverpool, New York. PB&J's Lunchbox, where we love to know what's in your lunchbox. This is a special message from 317 at Montgomery restaurant owner Joel Carpenter. Open Tuesday through Saturday for your dining pleasure on 317 Montgomery Street in Syracuse, New York.
We wanted to be a part of the resurgence of Syracuse. We saw a lot of money being put into bringing people back downtown and thought that, we'd like to be a part of that. I love putting together a good dish where people see it first, they fall in love with it, and then it tastes just as good as it looks. We want to provide the best food in Syracuse that we possibly can, and we want you to leave here talking to your family, your friends about what you had to eat first and foremost, but also our service, and to walk out feeling like you're part of our family. I work out in the front of the house a lot, and I love walking to every single table, asking them how everything is, and people looking at me and smiling and saying, this is the most amazing short rib I've ever had. This is the most amazing filet I've ever had. And Donna is great. Sarah's amazing. Thank you for coming over and talking to us. And them just being truly happy for the experience that they've gotten.
317 at Montgomery Restaurant, part of the fabric of downtown Syracuse, located on 317 Montgomery Street in Syracuse, New York. Open Tuesday through Saturday for a unique and memorable dining experience. Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Appreciate you so very much for being here with us every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time on YouTube.com, Facebook.com, and YouTube.com and Facebook.com, both / Wake Up Call DT, and on wakeupcalldt.podbean.com. Much appreciation for that. Once we go live, to jump into the archives on Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts, MixLR, Player FM, Podbean, Podvine, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, as well as Boomplay and Podchaser. You could search Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, or one word, Wake Up Call DT, and catch all of our shows, over 1,600 episodes, by going to your favorite podcasting platform. Big thanks to our incredible partners that you've heard throughout the show: Carvel DeWitt, the Wildcat Sports Pub, 317 at Montgomery Street; Great Lakes Honda City, Chick-fil-A Cicero and Chick-fil-A Clay; Pizza Man, Canine Camp Dog Daycare, Mother's Cupboard, PB&J's Lunchbox, GG Cards and Brakes, Canine Campground Dog Boarding, Chick-fil-A Watertown, Avicoli's. Thank you to all of our fantastic, and Mon Pa's Kettle Corn Popcorn Factory, if I didn't say them. Thank you to all of our fantastic partners in Central and Upstate New York. Of course, we are the exclusive multimedia marketing partner of your LeMoyne College Dolphins. It's Fins Up every single month on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. You could check out your Dolphins here during Dolphin time on Wednesdays, like today at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. First and third Wednesday, we bring you AD and DT with Athletics Director Bob Beretta and myself, Dan Tortora. Second, fourth Wednesday of each month, we bring you the Dolphin Dive, diving into the stories of student athletes, coaches, administration, future Dolphins, and alumni. Don't miss a second with the Dolphins by going to our LeMoyne tab on wakeupcalldt.com and by subscribing to youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. For more information on your Dolphins, go to LeMoyneDolphins.com, and as always, Fins Up. The Bryan and Stratton College Bobcats of Syracuse bring you the Bobcat Buzz in our exclusive multimedia marketing partnership with the Bobcats of Bryan and Stratton College of Syracuse. Every single month, you have the opportunity to hear from student athletes, coaches, and administration at Bryan and Stratton College of Syracuse. A unique experience for student athletes and students alike, right there on James Street in Syracuse, just outside of downtown Syracuse. The Bobcat Buzz coming to you every single month. We got a great one coming up this Friday with Tate Baker, the head coach of the women's basketball team, following a bunch of his recruiting messages. A great student athletes coming in to help out his team move forward. The Bobcat Buzz can be found on the BSC Syracuse tab on wakeupcalldt.com by subscribing to youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. And for more information, go to syracuse.bscbobcats.com. Go Bobcats. The Alfred University Saxons are exclusive multimedia marketing partners with Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. The Saxons come to you every first and third Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time during Saxon Time for your presidential perspective, featuring President of Alfred University, Mark Zupan. We just talked about the Saxon Hill Complex, expansion of the student athlete and student experience and fan experience. So you can check that out by going to youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. Every second and fourth Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, the Saxon Spotlight comes to you with student athletes, coaches, and administration joining me from the Saxons family to tell their incredible stories. So many great things we've already gotten to do with the Saxons. It's hard to believe that we have worked just 1 month with the Alfred University Saxons, and we have already had incredible stories from wonderful guests that make it feel like we've already done months and months of work with the Alfred University Saxons. I want to thank their leadership team for believing in me and believing in what we do at Dan Tortora Broadcast Media and at Wake Up Call. And I am so excited for everything we're going to be able to do as we have hit the ground running and had a fantastic time with the Saxons already. You can check out their content by going to the Alfred U tab on wakeupcalldt.com. And, of course, by subscribing to youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. For more information, go to gosaxons.com. And as the website says, go Saxons. Many thanks to my guest here from LeMoyne College, Athletics Director Bob Beretta, in our monthly series AD and DT. Many thanks to my guest from Syracuse Football, head football coach Dino, defensive back Justin Barron, and wide receiver Damien Alford. And, of course, many thanks to the Rapid City Journal's newest sports editor, that being my guy, Mr. Alex Dodd, speaking on college football's conundrum, as well as the ACC in the present and the ACC potentially in the future, and hoping that the ACC can navigate this very unique world that we live in right now, and hopefully things can work out in their favor, as I appreciate, respect, and thank the ACC for all the work that they've done. I hope that things can hopefully be looking up here for the ACC as we step forward. So big thanks to Alex Dodd, to Syracuse Football, and of course to Bob Beretta and LeMoyne College. We'll talk with you very soon on Wake Up Call. In the meantime, find us on social media at Wake Up Call DT on Facebook, at Call DT on Twitter, and at WakeUpCall_DT on Instagram. God bless. No stress. Do your best. Don't ever let anybody take you away from who you are. Do the best you can, and understand that that's all you need to do. It is not your responsibility to do somebody else's job. It's not your responsibility to have to live somebody else's life. Do the absolute best you can and trust in the Lord that everything comes out in the wash, and He's always got your